Lit, lit, lit. Reels, glide, lit, 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 lit. Right? The revolution is lit, lit, lit.
Uhuru, comrades, and welcome to today's Omali Taught Me Sunday Study, the Institute of African International Study. We are continuing the discussion on Russia and Ukraine, looking at the events that have unfolded this past week. We will also continue to look at this question in the context of the colonial mode of production. How is the colonial domination of Africa and African people connected to this conflict? And what must be done once we know the answer? To discuss this, we will have the honor of speaking with the leader of the African nation and worldwide African revolution, Chairman Omali Yeshitela. Before we move forward, I ask that you take a moment to like and share this video and tag someone you know to join this discussion right now. Disrupt Zuckerberg's censorship tactics by getting as many people onto this live. Do your part in making sure the masses of people hungry for this analysis can access it. Like and share this video and tag a friend right now. So we'll be bringing back our special guest from last week, Secretary General of the African Socialist International, Luwezi Kinshasa, and the ASI-Africa Regional Director of Organization, Tafarie Mugeri. While this will primarily be a discussion between our panelists, we may take questions that some of you posed last week. If you have another question, type that into the chat section and we will document it. During today's study, you can donate to our show at paypal.me/Omali Taught Me. You'll see that link available in the Facebook and YouTube description. So let's begin this discussion with an overview which provides the historical context for the struggle that we're seeing today, which includes updates around the situation with Russia and Ukraine from just this past week. So let's go ahead and get that overview up. So this is being brought to you by the Department of Agitation and Propaganda for the African People's Socialist Party. Next. This map shows Ukraine, which is considered to be in Europe. Ukraine shares borders with Russia, Belarus, Poland, Slovakia, Hungary, Romania, and Moldova. Next. This map shows the Donbas region of Ukraine, where Donetsk is located, recognized by Russia as Russian territory. Most of the 3.6 million people living in this region speak Russian as their primary language. Next. This map shows Crimea, circled, which is a key geopolitical Russian territory next to Ukraine on the Black Sea, facing Turkey, which functions as a US military base and key ally. Next. A United Nations vote condemning Russia this week got 5 votes against the resolution. The no votes came from Russia, Belarus, Syria, North Korea, and Eritrea. A total of 35 abstentions came from around the world, including 16 from African countries, among them South Africa, Mozambique, Angola, Algeria, Namibia. China, Iraq, Iran, Pakistan, India, Cuba, Vietnam, Nicaragua, Bolivia, and others abstained. 12 countries did not vote at all, including Venezuela. The colors are purple for yes, orange for no, and brown for abstaining. Next. All the colonial powers built on the enslavement of African people and the colonial mode of production around the world are lined up in the attack on Russia, which never participated in the enslavement of African people and aided in African liberation movements. Next. The US is bombing and sending drone strikes around the world every day against colonized peoples. The US drops an average of 46 bombs per day every day and dropped at least 337,000 bombs and missiles on colonized countries in the past 20 years. Next. Here are some of the quote unquote hotspots where the US is bombing, sending drone strikes, not to mention everywhere that the US is starving and sanctioning and just plain killing us, including African people colonized inside the US. Next. Since 1991, when the US orchestrated the collapse of the Soviet Union, US-backed NATO encroached 800 miles closer to Russia and put billions of dollars of military aid into Ukraine's surrounding countries. Next. The US orchestrated the 2004 Orange Revolution, and Ukraine orchestrated the coup in 2014 with right-wing Svoboda Party and anti-Russian forces coming to power. Next. This week, US levied fresh sanctions on Russia, talked about blocking Russian Aeroflot flights into the US, barred 7 Russian banks from the US financial network, and shut down Russian media sources in European countries. Next. Russia's currency, the Russian ruble, has dropped 30% in the past few days of US sanctions. Next. The United States and NATO are putting billions of dollars into arming Ukraine forces. Next. The US-backed NATO is threatening Russia at a time when Biden's approval rating polls were the lowest ever, 37%. Next. The US media is vilifying Russia and Putin, putting out massive disinformation and countless lies about the situation. Next. Poland is accepting millions of white Europeans from Ukraine. African people and other colonial nationalities are catching hell from Ukrainians and Polish people, something some African countries raised at the United Nations vote. And we're going to show a clip of that, those attacks happening against Africans in Ukraine and Poland. Real.
They're not letting her go. They're not letting the black girl go. We don't have them. We are students. We don't have them.
These people left without taking the blacks, man. None of the blacks, man.
There's been a lot of segregation and racism. It seems like there's a hierarchy of Ukrainians first, Indians second, Africans last. So there has been a lot of segregation in that sense. And then amongst the communities trying to flee Ukraine, there's been a lot of violence.
Я зараз скажу, хто я. Привіт! Я зараз цей телефон.
These are the black community. We are not allowing any black people to enter inside the gates. We are all here. It's only Ukrainians that they are allowing in. Even the ones with kids.
हम लोग सब रोमानियन बॉर्डर पे खड़े हैं, रोमानियन यूक्रेनियन बॉर्डर पे अराउंड 500 to 600 बच्चे हैं। ये लोग यूक्रेनियंस को बहुत प्रेफर कर रहे हैं, यूक्रेनियंस को ही प्रेफरेंस दे रहे हैं, इंडियंस को 1 या 2 निकाल रहे हैं एट अ टाइम।
On est là exposé dehors avec le froid qu'il y a ici. On ne nous donne toujours pas où nous abriter au fait. On est exposé avec le froid.
यहाँ पे ठंड इतनी है कि हम बता नहीं सकते, इतना ठंड, और कुछ शेल्टर नहीं है, वॉशरूम का कोई ये नहीं है, शेल्टर नहीं है, कहीं पे कुछ खाने पीने का कुछ ये नहीं है, रेस्टोरेंट नहीं है, पूरा ओवर क्राउडेड हो गया है।
We are being thrown out to the train. They are not even allowing us in. Indian students are being attacked with sticks and stuff.
We don't have arms. We don't have arms. We don't have arms. We are students. We are students. We are students. We are students. Take out your phone. Take out your phone.
So again, that was footage of Africans and other colonized people trying to flee Ukraine, and the Ukrainian government, white Europeans being given the preference to escape, and Africans under attack. So it's important to note that the African People's Socialist Party over our 50-year history, has always, really understood this question around Russia. And in fact, here is a photo where Russia warmly welcomes Chairman Omali Yeshitela to speak in Russia 3 times throughout the course of our party's history. Next. The chairman was invited to speak at the conference called Dialogue of Nations, People's Right to Self-Determination and the Building of a Multipolar World. And you'll see the chairman right there, right in the center, speaking at the Dialogue of Nations. So this is why we need to understand the colonial mode of production and the analysis of African internationalism, which the chairman will discuss with us today. So that concludes our overview, comrades, again, trying to provide some context of, the situation in Russia and Ukraine, some historical context. This is all happening within the frame of colonialism as a mode of production, and also to showcase, the party's leadership and history around this question of Russia as well. So thank you all for, sticking with us as we went through that. So now it's my honor to welcome the leader of the African nation and the worldwide African revolution, Chairman Omali Yeshitela. Uhuru, Chairman.
Uhuru, thank you, Comrade Director Akile. Thank you so much.
Uhuru, Chairman. And I also want to introduce Secretary General Luwezi Kinshasa. And looks like our Comrade Director Tafarie has not been able to join us just yet, but would also like to bring on Comrade Secretary General Luwezi so we can begin asking some of the first questions, and also just opening this up for discussion, which I know the overview in and of itself could garner some response from all of our panelists today. So Chairman, why don't we start there? Before we get into any questions, do you want to, just give us, some opening remarks around this topic?
Well, thank you so much, Comrade Akile. I think it's very important, the overview that you just presented to us. I would like to add a couple of things. And one of them is that the world must recognize that the movement against Russia to destroy Russia and its intervention into what might be characterized as modern history based on the full-blown advent of the whole colonial capitalist social system. The aggression that was initiated against Russia reached an extraordinarily kind of intensity in 1917. This was the beginning of what we see now occurring in Russia-Ukraine conflict as it's being characterized. I think it's extremely important to understand that, because in 1917, the Russian Revolution occurred. And this is the thing that brought Russia to an element of what might be characterized as modernity. It was not a movement from feudalism to capitalism as did happen with most of Europe. And as you know, the movement from feudalism to capitalism is something that happened on the backs of enslaved African people and other colonized peoples around the world, but particularly against Africans. It was that Karl Marx referred to as primitive accumulation of capital, the startup of the entire thing. And Russia did not come Russian modernity was not achieved through that process. The modernity was achieved through the process of an assault on the whole colonial capitalist system. And this was the thing that made it a threat to the entire white world, And so you saw all of the European countries in America included, they invaded Russia at that time to try to destroy the Soviet Union. The only relief came to Russia was at that moment during the Second Imperialist World War, they like to refer to as World War II, when they needed to utilize Russia to protect that particular flank in the war that they were engaged in with Germany. And so there was this united front, if you will, against fascism. The Russians, the United States, and England and France, and Russia participated, at least theoretically, in the struggle against Hitler in Germany. The truth of the matter, of course, is that Russia bore the brunt of that struggle, even though history is taught in the United States that how somehow the United States won that war. The United States didn't even enter the war until very late in the process, and Russia lost from 25 to 50 million people. And it was Russia that crushed Hitler's armies and things like that. Sometime shortly thereafter that, the United States was really concerned. Also, the United States, by the way, along with most of the colonial powers of Europe, stood back and watched Germany attack Russia with the intent of seeing Germany and Russia destroy or weaken themselves. So even that war was used as a part of an offensive against Russia by the US and what they like to call the West, which is the white colonial countries of the world. They used that even in the name of, while they were talking about having a friendly relationship against what they characterize as fascism or Germany, they moved in a way that was designed to push forward the destruction of Russia, or at what they referred to at the time as Soviet Russia, because of the Soviet Union that came into existence shortly after the successful Russian Revolution. So I think it's important. This happened more than 100 years ago, that we're talking about this initial invasion, the advent of the Soviet Union, the advent of the Russian Revolution that was made in the name of overturning capital. But as you and I know, capitalism itself rests upon a foundation of colonialism. And so when the attack on Russia was really an attack ultimately to defend the colonial mode of production. So I think that's one thing that's missing from most of the discussion, even from so-called progressives who want to talk about, who are able now to talk about colonialism. We hear more and more discussion about colonialism, but they don't talk about colonialism as a mode of production, and therefore they can't see the world properly. The other thing, and in fact, that's extraordinarily important and necessary for Africans, because once we understand colonialism as a mode of production, then we can see the centrality of Africa, African people in history, of what might be characterized as modern history. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is that we see a lot of people who are able to talk about this Russia-Ukraine issue as something that sort of has its origin in 2014 with the US assisted and perhaps led overthrow of the Ukrainian government to replace it with a government that was hostile or that would facilitate the ability of this ongoing struggle against Russia. We saw in 1991, however, with the collapse of the Soviet Union, we saw the movement of more and aggression against Russia with enveloping many of the entities that were part of the Soviet Union into the military wing of the colonial powers of the world that's called NATO. I think in 1991, there may have been something like 19 or so of these, and perhaps even fewer, members of NATO. Now there's something like pretty close to 30. of these members of NATO. And these are countries who participate as a part of the military wing, military arm, forward military arm of the United States government, organized in this thing called NATO, which itself was created for the purpose of attacking Russia. NATO's existence, it was brought into existence precisely, explicitly for the purpose of attacking Russia. And at the time, they characterized it as Soviet Russia. And so I think it's really important to have a foundation that recognizes that we're talking about more than just something that happened 8 years ago. We are talking about something that at least goes back to the founding of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, which was founded for the purpose of extending the war against Russia that had begun in 1917. I think that's really important for us to understand. And then finally, that while many people are increasingly able to speak to the question of colonialism, you hear that more and more as a consequence of the parties. The African People's Socialist Party continuous struggle against this whole concept of fighting against racism or something like this, which is something that attempts to perfect the colonial system itself, or perfected. We say that colonialism is the contradiction, and more have been able to say colonialism is the contradiction. But the thing that must be understood is that colonialism, while it may have been a policy some 600 years ago, when Henry the Navigator initiated much of the assault on Africa in 1415, it may have been a policy then, but it moved beyond simply a policy, and colonialism became a mode of production, the foundation for all of the economic activity, the base of the existing kind of social system that exists today. And it began with Africa. It began at the time, so I'll just leave it there. I just think it's extremely important to understand that if you want to get a better, meaningful perception of what's going on with Russia and Ukraine. And then just to say this, that there have been some forces, some of whom characterize themselves as leftists and communists, who really want to explain to us how Russia, neither Russia nor Ukraine, is a worker state, and that's what we have to do, as Lenin talked about some years ago, take some kind of a position that calls on the workers of Ukraine and Russia to overthrow or to turn the guns against the bourgeoisie in Russia and Ukraine. There's some iteration of Lenin's position some time ago. And that's what some people are saying, and others are equalizing the Russia-Ukraine question, and both of them are bad, and both of them have done bad things to people, etc. You hear some of that. But the fact of the matter is that independent of the consciousness and the intent of Putin, independent of the consciousness of those people who are involved in this process, Ukraine is objectively a part of this ongoing assault on Russia, which objectively came into existence in modern history as a part of the struggle against colonialism, independent of the consciousness of people who were involved in that, working for the power to the working class. That is the objective basis for the creation of both of those. And the United States and Europe have not ceased making assault on Russia since 1917. And that's something that's really important for us to understand. So we stand side by side with Russia in defense of this ongoing aggression that began in 1917 as an attack on the ability of the working people of the world to achieve freedom from this colonial mode of production. So thank you, Comrade Director Uhuru.
Uhuru, Chairman, thank you. I really, really appreciate that overview, additional overview. And I just think it's really important to say, this position, because we're not on the fence, and we're not, like our position is very clear, and we have a basis as for why, and African internationalism helps to explain that. So I just really think that's important, what you just laid out. I want to open it up also to Secretary General Luwezi Kinshasa, and it looks like Comrade Director Tafarie is also on. wanting to see if either of you can contribute to the overview that was just given.
Who Chairman, who Director Kiri, who Director Tafarie, and the whole comrades who are watching. It's a great honor, as usual, to be invited in this study. And so, what first, I just want to unite with what our chairman said, the overview he has given, and it is. I also appreciate just the maps we have seen so far, because it's really just reminds me that we're living in a serious time where everything has to be done strategically, and Africans have to study, with strategy. You don't just study, but study with strategy, and that's what the party is providing. And when you look at the significance of what they call Russia today, and people have to really to remember in the 50s, in the 60s, for example, we've been talking about it, that the Soviet Union were the ones who gave the weapons to the Africans, but you never seen or never heard of the British or the French. It doesn't matter if they call themselves Marxist or revolutionary or socialist or whatever, giving weapons to the Mau Mau. You didn't hear that. You didn't hear the French, mobilizing, giving weapons to the FLN, the National Liberation Front in Algeria, fighting to free from France. You don't hear that. In fact, the Communist Party of France, condemned the struggle of Algerian people for national liberation struggle. Because when you see all this propaganda on the television, when you see the unity of white people being expressed itself, and you read the newspapers, you see what people who call themselves the left in Europe, what they're doing. As just the Chairman said, they putting Russia and Ukraine on the same plate. Both are just bad. Is unbelievable, but you will not understand that, as the Chairman said, if you don't know the history, and you just look at the recent history. When we needed weapons to get the Portuguese out of Angola, we didn't get it from the Portuguese Marxists and so on. That's really an important point for us to understand. And you've seen the images of Africans, being brutalized, being abused, and other oppressed people. And this must speak to all of us that the struggle for Black people has not been completed yet. So you should be really angry to realize that the struggle we're talking about to complete today has been betrayed by the African people bourgeoisie. The people who are in power, they're the ones in every single country in Africa, or in the Caribbean, or in a Black community throughout the world, US, Canada, Brazil, and so on. The African people bourgeoisie has betrayed the struggle, our struggle for power. If the struggle for Marcus Garvey, Malcolm X, Kwame Lumumba have been completed, nobody's going to humiliate Black people the way you just observed. So we can't just now consume images and feel sad. You go being angry, but you go demand solution. And that's what these studies about. It's not just to tell you what's going on in the world. You have the right to be angry, but most importantly, you have to demand a solution. And we have the solution. The African People's Socialist Party, African Internationalism, Chairman Omali Yeshitela, basically our leadership, we have the solution. That's why we're making this program, to tell you, be hungry, but join us. Join us. That's really is something that's really fundamental. And also, an aspect of this crisis, many of our people, they are trapped because the propaganda, the recent history, they think the power of the colonizers is forever. No, it's not forever. You heard that Russia was no part of the colonial, primitive accumulation that allowed the Europeans, through global colonialism to come out of feudality. Because to their material conditions, they did not need even to move west, because there was no movement of Russia going west. They did not need to get involved in slavery, because the economy they have was good for them. Remember the Chinese emperor in the 15th centuries, the development was more advanced than Europe, and they say there's nothing to look for outside Europe, outside China. So they did not need to go out, looter, to plunder, and things like that. So it makes really sense for us to understand that there was a beginning of this process, and that this is going on up to this very moment. And when you understand that we Africans, we are definitely essential to this process. I mean, the process of ending this ongoing onslaught, looting and killing and so on, because the crisis created by this situation in Ukraine is directly linked to what Africans are going to do. Because guess what? What's going up now? The price of gold is going up. The price of copper is going up. The price of zinc is going up. Where you think you get all this gold? Africa has lots of it. Africa is a key producer of gold. South Africa is one. Mali is one. Congo is one. Ghana is one, and so on. And you're talking about zinc. You're talking about copper. All this stuff. Africa has them in abundance. And that's where the imperialists are trying to find safe haven. They're hiding there. So when we're doing this, because we do understand our centrality, and we want you to understand it, and we want you to do something about it. And that's why we did this program. And being central for us, I mean, you being in a revolution, you being in a party, you being in our movement, that's how the centrality of Africa will express itself in the world, because we are key, definitely, in this world created at our expense, created by global colonialism. We are definitely the cornerstone, and we want you to join so we can move forward. These are some of the things I can say now. Yes, sir.
Well, I see Comrade Tafarie, the Director of Organization for Africa from the party, and the chair of the African People's Socialist Party, occupied Azania, in what they refer to as South Africa. I think it's important to say that, because we've been looking at Europe making and changing borders as a whole process of coming into existence at our expense. So we call it South Africa. That's what the white man named it, and named himself a South African. And I think that if we understand things like that, it helps us to put this issue of Ukraine and Russia and who's who into a greater context, and understand the political and economic motivation for all of that. So there's an economic motivation for the creation of what they call South Africa by white settlers. And if the United States took the same stance that they pretend to be taking now about Russia and Ukraine, they would be bombing white people in Johannesburg, but they're not doing that because it's all right for the white people that have taken Johannesburg. It's a double standard. Even the white left throughout Europe and various other places won't even talk about that. And the fact that that much of the attack on the peoples of the world comes from a place they call the United States, that itself is a creature of colonialism at the expense of indigenous and African people. Comrade Tafarie, it's good to see you. Uhuru.
Chairman, thank you. I just want to firstly see this program, and then I'm in the car here because I have to get my phone charged. Most of the time there's no electricity here in the townships, so I unite with everything that the chairman has just said. Even now, even in terms of this country, it's a settler colony. South Africa is a settler colony, and it was born through that process of just creating the social system that we're talking about in terms of its mode of production being colonialism. So we are here, in South Africa, and South Africa is a consequence of that attack on African people that resulted in this whole social system that we're talking about today. And I'm saying this because, you know, talking about Russia, the United States having an opinion about Russia or having somehow managing to influence some other countries somewhere close to Russia and being a threat is because of the same process, you know, that got us into the situation of South Africa. You know, it's the same process that made America to be America. You know, it's colonialism altogether everywhere. And here, the population, the white population, I heard that the ANC or South Africa is, you know, just did not vote, held its vote in terms of this question around Russia in the United Nations. But then you see the white population here, you know, making phone calls, even their NGOs and organizations asking, you know, like the ANC somehow must take a stand against Russia. You know, the white population here is clear about that. They want, because this is like the colonial white population, they want to force the government here, you know, the neo-colonial government here to take a stand. And I saw somewhere actually, somehow the spokesperson for the ANC condemning Russia actually, you know, despite what was said there at the United Nations. You know. So they may actually in practice somehow, you know, they have taken a position against Russia. And so I unite everything that the chairman was saying earlier, even just the history and the fact that they control the narrative right now, you know. The imperialist, Western imperialism, as it's called, they control the narrative. There is a media company here, one of the major media companies here, called Multiple Choice. You know, those that have access to this thing called DSTV, that can watch many channels like CNA, Al Jazeera, and you know, Russia Today. It has actually announced that this channel called Russia Today will not anymore, starting from Wednesday, they will not allow Russia Today to broadcast anything. You know, so it's imperialism everywhere is united, and I think the reason for this is because they understand what this means in terms of the whole social system that's in crisis right now. Should Russia manage to succeed right there, it has huge implications for Western imperialism. And at the same time, should Russia be defeated there, it has implications for the whole world. You know that Russia is at the center of things, but then the system itself, it's in crisis. You look at the fact that Russia is able to project the future in terms of what it means to have NATO on its borders right there. Because some people, they're looking at it in terms of, no, these people invading other people and whatever. But then what does this mean in terms of 20 years from now? Because the USA is capable of overthrowing governments and like imposing puppet regimes like they have done in Ukraine, like they have done in many other places in history. So I just unite with the you know, with the position of the party that we stand with Russia, and we do this from an objective analysis with the understanding that the whole world is interconnected right now. We're talking about a social system that affects all human beings in the world. That's why I'm actually, you know, upset and even disappointed with some of these people who are supposed to be black representatives. You know, like some of these Pan-Africanists who talk about, no, it's just white people fighting against white people, so we should not be involved in whatever. But then when you look at what happens in Ethiopia, for example, the TPLF fighting against the government, America has an opinion about that because they know, you know, like they have a stake in that. America has a stake in Ethiopia. America had a stake in Libya in terms of the internal affairs there, you know, because they know that even though they are miles away, it's a global economy and it's based on parasitism. They require the resources of all human beings in the world. So we cannot look at Africa as something that's isolated out there, that's not affected by the events of the world. Uhuru.
Uhuru, I want to thank Comrade Tafarie for that, and Comrade Secretary General Luwezi. Another thing I would say is that our approach to this question is related to the Secretary General's call to join this party. Because what we are looking at is a whole crisis in the social system. Nothing is going to be the same after this conflict that we see with Russia defending itself from an attack by America and all of the colonial powers that's coming through NATO. It's not going to be the same. The economic configuration. I mean, right now already, as Comrade Tafarie just mentioned, the price of gold and perhaps Comrade Secretary General Luwezi, but it's affected the price of gold, petroleum, everything. I mean, people who in countries like the United States, which rich countries, great looters of resources that they've stolen from everybody and concentrated here. What we see is that people who went to sleep last night with the price of gasoline at one place woke up this morning with the gasoline having, boom, gone up again. And that we're talking about a regime here, a rotten, foul regime. I'm talking about America. I'm talking about what they characterize as America, the United States. The whole social system is a rotten, foul social system that rests upon a foundation of genocide of the indigenous peoples here, the stolen forced labor of African people. It has no redeeming qualities at all. You will not hear this involved into any of the narratives that's talking about the moral authority or something like that, about making judgments about Ukraine and Russia being this evil empire because it's in Ukraine. When the persons who are making the statement doing so on the graves of millions of indigenous people, something like 50 million of which had been murdered in the Americas by the 1600s. This is the brutality that we're talking about that brought this thing into existence. And these are the forces that are united today in forwarding this struggle against Russia. This is independent of Putin. Putin is not a communist. In fact, from some of the things I've heard him say, he's an anti-communist. But the point is where they are located strategically, historically in the process of the unfolding of the colonial mode of production makes it extremely important for us. That's the basis. It's not based on some sentiment around that, even though you can like anybody in the world better than you can like Biden, better than you can like Macron, better than you can like these creatures who come straight out of colonial slavery to continue to dominate us. Our objective in the African People's Socialist Party is not just about to bring some kind of abstract analysis that people can debate and we got a better argument than they've got. Our objective is to govern. And not just to govern in South Africa, but to take Africa, our mother country, back for Africa. And to take Africa and unite Africa on the continent and Africans around the world who've been forcibly dispersed and thereby located in these very strategic places in the world that makes possible for the first time in human history the advent of a real communist revolution that will put power in the hands of the workers of the world, because that's who we are as African people. So that's what this discussion is. For whatever purpose anybody else comes to this discussion, we are having this discussion as a part of the process of preparing to govern, preparing to be in power where Comrade Tafarie is, where Comrade Luwezi currently sitting up in London as a part of the European region of the African People's Socialist Party, where I am located in the United States as a part of the North American region of the African People's Socialist Party, and also in the Caribbean and other places. This is what we are involved in. So we see the whole system of the colonial mode of production is stressed out, serious problem. And we've seen some of the most significant evidence of this, of course, is the crisis that has come to public view in the United States, where many people know, most people know that the United States has been for at least the last 70 years or more the anchor to the entire colonial capitalist system. Almost everything revolves around the United States. And so when you see the crisis in the United States, what you're viewing actually is an expression of that crisis concentrated in the United States, but it's true for all of the colonial mode of production, all of Europe experiencing. You see the same kinds of things, the attacks on immigrants. You see the same kinds of things, the challenge to the existing even borders and things like that. We've seen over the last period of years, borders changing in Europe. They do this with some kind of frequency. Every time there's a struggle, they have a conference, they change the borders. It used to be a Czechoslovakia and as a Czech Republic. It used to be this and that. It doesn't exist anymore because it doesn't serve their interests. We need to understand the centrality of Africa and African people to the political economy of the world and assume responsibility as leaders of the revolution to do that, to lead, to govern, etc. And history is made by human beings. And it is our responsibility as conscious participants to make this history to actually facilitate the development of human society globally. And in this period of dominance, domination by Europe, this plague that has been imposed on the world by Europe, who rescued itself from poverty, disease, despair, a lack of freedom by the attack on Africa in particularly, that goes back all the way to the beginning in the 1300s and whatever, 1400s. So that's the foundation of this entire thing. And we're against it, and we will fight against it, and we won't be distracted by some narrative that will make the greatest threat or problem in the world something that's happening to white people in Ukraine. When those white people in Ukraine actually facilitate the war against Russia that began more than 100 years ago, when Russia was clearly a part of the process that was struggling against colonialism. So I want to say that, and I'm going to turn it over to Comrade Director Akile let's flesh it out further. What does it take to make that happen? Uhuru.
Chairman. Well, there are definitely questions from last week and also great questions coming in today around this discussion. So I want to go ahead and allow us to look at those, but just also express appreciation for what's been set up to now. And I think that everything that's been stated helps to for us to understand how Africa is really at the center of the whole, even the struggle between Russia and Ukraine, that Africa is the essential component to all of the contradictions we see unfolding throughout the world. And it just helps for African people to understand this is why this should matter to us. We can't just, close our eyes to it and say, well, we only looking at what's happening with Black people and, what's over there happening when white people don't matter. It totally matters. It impacts the whole global situation. So just really appreciate all of the panelists for digging into that. So,
and just to say, Comrade Director, there is a global situation because of Africa.
Right.
It was Africa. It was the attack on Africa that created the whole global economy. There was no global situation before then. There was no white man before the attack on Africa. All of this, that's why we talk about a mode of production that gives definition to everything that happens within the context of life, social life. I just wanted to make that intervention. And part of it is for Africans to wake up and come to recognize the singular role that we have played up to now. And this is not even talking about pre-colonial history of Africa and what Africa has brought to the planet, to humanity. But that's what I think is really important, especially for us to understand our role in the development of this whole colonial capitalist existence. Uhuru.
Thank you, Chairman. So taking a look at some of the questions that came in from last week, and I just want to also encourage, if you are just joining this discussion, to make sure you like this video, share this video, tag someone right now in the comment section. I see Comrade Lisa in the comment section doing that. So follow Comrade Lisa and tag people who need to be a part of what's being discussed right now. Again, subscribe to the Burning Spur TV and donate to paypal.me/OmaliTaughtMe. If you like what you're hearing right now, if you want to support this show, donate to paypal.me/OmaliTaughtMe. So taking a look at one of the questions coming from last week, this came in from Comrade Life in Tampa. And he asked, is a third imperialist war to divide the world a plausible expectation, or should we expect the next conflict of such scale manifested as a worldwide conflict between colonized peoples against colonizers? And all of you have, spoken to this in a sense, but just concentrating on that in Life's question. So Uhuru, and let me know if I need to repeat it.
Well, first of all, I want to say that what they characterize as the third imperialist world war, we use that term sometimes too about first and second imperialist world wars. But even that is a mischaracterization of what has happened in history, because this wars, worldwide wars against Africa began some time ago, and they characterize the first and World War I and World War II based on the contest between colonizers to redivide the world. That's what that is about. But colonizers have fought to redivide Africa. That's the basis of Marcus Garvey's cry that Africa for Africans at home and abroad, is because with the League of Nations, in 1919, where they were parceling out parts of Africa, 1884, parceling out parts of Africa, the configuration of Africa that we look at today, talking about borders, talk about no respect for legal norms and what have you that Russia is supposed to represent. How a bunch of white men can sit down around a table in Berlin, Germany, 1884 and 85, and carve out what parts of Africa they're going to take, and then create these artificial entities that they call countries in Africa, all of which has in service to white power. This is a part of what it is that we've been looking at. So in fact, that 1884 and 85 conference was called in Berlin to keep white countries, colonial powers, from engaging in more war with each other. Let's solve this problem so white people, the colonizers, won't have to kill each other. Let's carve it up and give each of us a piece of it as a part of this process. So, people refer to, I guess the greater question is the possibility of Europe and perhaps China, Russia, entering into more overt kinds of conflagration in terms of a fight among themselves. And that's a real possibility that will happen. And depending on the efficacy, the expedition with which we build the African People's Socialist Party globally, then Africa will be a primary factor in leading the anti-colonial struggle against the colonizers of the world. And I think that is already beginning. Comrade Life. Uhuru.
Yes.
Someone else may want to address that.
Yeah, what I would like to add is that we African internationalists, we have to be optimists. We have to have faith in ourselves, and we also have a history, because they are, the bourgeoisie and all that. They're talking of a possibility of third world war and stuff like that. But we have a past with the Haiti Revolution, because that was a response on how you end colonialism as a global mode of production. The Haitian Revolution demanded everywhere struggles to be waged to eradicate, colonial slavery as it was known then. And you remember also, Chairman has talked about Garvey, the significance of Garvey, to unite the African nation, because this will be the way of ending that. The alternative is between colonial wars, as we said, and also African internationalism. Taking Haiti as an example, the historical example that Africans consciously organized ourselves so we can go to war everywhere to end this system. And African internationalism today is an alternative for the whole humanity, for Africans, but for everyone who wants to have a proper, a genuine peace, a genuine, relationship with people on the planet. We should be talking of how to make African internationalism successful, how to launch the African Revolution. And you go remember, what do you have in Africa? Everybody is in Africa. You have military bases in Africa. Even China has a military bases. The Japanese are having one soon. Saudi Arabia are trying to have one. Turkey is asking for one, and Russia is involved in a struggle with France, at least in two places: Republic of Central Africa, and also in Mali. So Africans have to be aware of all this, in that the centrality of Africans. We are part, what's happening in Ukraine, we are part of that, in the sense that, just give you an example of Mali and or Central African Republic, but also, as the chairman said, everything has its origin on the attack on Africa. So we have to internalize that. The attack on Africa is the starting point, and we have to launch a revolution that will basically reclaim the all for Africa, and we are the most strategically located. So every struggle for Africans is international, because it's going to happen in Europe, it's going to happen in Americas, it's going to happen in Africa, it's going to happen in the Pacific Island, and this is the response that will change the history of humanity. So we don't want the World War III, as they call it. We want the African Revolution. We want everybody to be discussing how you make the African Revolution successful. If you want a free world, free from slavery, free from all oppression, that's all. This is the agenda we have to put on the table, so we can advance. The history of humanity. You might say it passed through African Revolution. So that's basically what I can add. Or
I just wanna add one more thing, and I unite completely with what is being said by STUZ and the chairman. I want to make sure that I'm not frozen here. I'm just, like, people are talking about world war, and I saw that even on the news and things like that. And I think the reason they are talking about this is because we're talking in terms of Europe here. And should Russia succeed in Ukraine right now, they are worried, because even in the US itself has to be worried about what happens in Europe. That's why they even created this whole NATO organization, because now some of the organizations that are in NATO now used to be part of we're so-called satellites of the USSR. Like they were part of, it was referred to as the Eastern Bloc and whatever, which were influenced by the Soviets. And now some of them are part of NATO, like Poland, for example. But then you have, countries which governments that still sympathize with Russia, like Belarus and whatever. But then, if it happens that Russia has an influence or some kind of sphere of influence in terms of Russia, that can turn things upside down, because we're talking about countries that control the world economy, like as you was talking about the competition in terms of Mali and what was this other place, Central African Republic. So they have to be worried. It's a world war, because what is happening in Ukraine is not, I don't think there's more people that have died in Ukraine compared to maybe say in Ethiopia now in terms of this whole conflict. So why does this create threat for world war? Why is it? Is it because of the scale of the war? No, it's not because of the scale of the war. I think it's because of what it means for Europe. They don't want, sometimes they're even explicit about this, to say, this is Europe. You can't have that happening in Europe, because that's the center of, that's where the imperialist headquarters are, including the United States. And the United States know that it would be isolated should Europe become weak, and Europe is becoming weaker. You look at Britain and even especially France, actually. with all this resistance it's getting in Africa. So it cannot afford to lose its allies in Europe, So that's why they're now talking about world war and whatever. I don't think it has to do. We have to question, why now? Why didn't they say the same thing about Afghanistan or even Yemen, for example? There's war in Yemen right now. Like people are starving. Why haven't they been talking about this thing of world war and so forth?
Well, I want to comment. I thank you so much for that intervention, Comrade Director Tafarie. I think it's also important to discuss this whole question about the former Russian satellites, got a chance to really be free from Russia and to go and do their own thing and rah, 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 they're now free, etc. But the thing is, free from Russia for what? And the fact is that the whole colonial powers of the world had isolated Russia economically, kept Russia out of the colonial mode of production. So there were shortages of these things in Russia that they had in France and they had in the United States and they had in England, because all of them were eating of the flesh of Black people and brown people and Asians all around the world. So they had all these things. And anybody is old enough to remember the poor East Europeans who were breaking free from Russia and what have you. What you saw was white people in fur coats and other things like that. They were pretty well off, but what they wanted to be free to do is join with the traditional colonial powers to eat the flesh of Black people and colonize peoples around the world. And so, yes, they wanted to be free to do that. And I'm reminded of even the concept of free trade that emerged in the United States at a particular time in the struggle that they were engaged in with England when they were English colony. And the free trade was around, they wanted the freedom to be able to sell Black people too, since the Crown monopolized the slave trade. And so they were fighting for freedom. They wanted to be able to sell Black people. And now you have all these countries that were part of what they call Eastern Europe, that were part of what they call the Soviet satellites and what have you. They wanted freedom too. They wanted freedom to suck the blood of Black people around the world, of all the other peoples of the world, so they can have the things that the bloodsuckers in what they call the West have. I think it's really important for us to understand that. So there's an objective truth to the fact that they were fighting for freedom, but freedom for what and from what? And that's part of what it is that we have to look at objectively. And again, this is independent of whatever Putin thinks or thought about it. It is just objectively the truth that these so-called Russian satellites got an opportunity to join the bandwagon of all of the so-called Western colonial powers to suck the blood and eat the flesh of colonized people, Africans, and everybody around the world. I have no sympathy for that. And when those white people, those leftists who are talking about the task is for the workers to unite in Ukraine and Russia and to turn their guns against the enemy as though the enemy is just some pure abstraction like that. I say that the task is to win those white people in so-called Eastern Europe, including Ukraine, to turn their guns against their leaders who joining in this struggle to eat the flesh of oppressed and colonized people globally. Uhuru. Let's take it forward.
Uhuru. Uhuru Chairman, Uhuru Secretary General Luwezi Kinshasa, and Director Tafarie Mugeri. So this has been a powerful discussion so far, and it truly reflects African people claiming our place in this world as subjects of history. And we have to make it impossible for people to talk about the crisis of the social system in whatever way it's manifest without mentioning the crucial role that the colonial domination of Africa and African people plays. This understanding of colonialism as the mode of production allows us to understand the Russia-Ukraine conflict so clearly. And right now, we're actually going to pause for a brief commercial break, and then we're going to come back to this discussion. So thank you, Chairman, Secretary General Luwezi. Guys, just hold tight for me. And we're going to go into our announcements. Like I said, they're going to be brief, but I just want to let you guys know a couple of things coming up within our movement. And also so that this discussion is not just a discussion, but calling on you to actively participate by joining the African Revolution. So let's get those announcements up so we can get back to this discussion quickly. There we are. All right. So this first announcement is regarding the Uhuru Solidarity Movement Convention on March 18th to the 20th. The Uhuru Solidarity Movement will host its annual national convention titled Unity Through Reparations, Reparations Through Organization. Keynote presentations by Chairman Omali Yeshitela and African People's Solidarity Committee Chairwoman Penny Hess. This convention will win white people to understand that their responsibility, their interests, and their future is found in the revolutionary anti-colonial struggle for reparations to African people. The convention will kick off with a major, bold political action at the St. Louis Arch on Friday, March 18th. The rest of the conference will be held online. For more information and to register, go to uhurusolidarity.org/register. Next. The African National Women's Organization calls on Black women and our supporters to attend the Black Women's Convention, March 25th to the 27th, 2022. The Black Women's Convention is an annual gathering of working class Black women who believe that colonial capitalism must be destroyed in order for African women to be free. To register today, visit convention.anwouhuru.org. There's also a raffle going on right now. I believe it's, I think it's like $10 to enter this raffle. So all that information can be found at convention.anwouhuru.org to support the African National Women's Organization and attend the Black Women's Convention. Uhuru. So next, again, we want to call on you to subscribe to the Burning Spirit TV on YouTube if you're watching on YouTube right now, or if you're not, to travel over to the Burning Spirit TV on YouTube to subscribe to this channel where we air all of the Omali Taught Me Sunday studies, and also to donate right now to this incredible show. You can donate at paypal.me/Omali Taught Me. Again, that's paypal.me/Omali Taught Me. So support the work of this show, build the audience, and subscribe to the Burning Spirit TV. And again, donate to your favorite show, Omali Taught Me Sunday Study. So paypal.me/Omali Taught Me. And next. So of course, those conventions are not the only thing happening in our movement, but for more information about everything that's going on, visit theburningspear.com/events. You'll see some evidence there of some of the events that are coming up. So more information is available. You want to know how to get involved, what next event you can participate in, visit theburningspear.com/events. So that will conclude visual announcements. And I just want to take this moment right now to really stress and urge the need for you to join the African Revolution, join the African People's Socialist Party, that the task is on us with the situation we see in the world, to not despair, to not allow the colonial propaganda of this situation in Russia to, dictate how it is that we have to move as African people, that our interests as African people, our capacity to speak for ourselves and fight for ourselves to seize power rests in the African People's Socialist Party. This year, we're celebrating 50 years of history of leadership toward African redemption. And this is the vehicle in which is going to ensure the success of African workers seizing power over our lives in the destruction of colonial capitalism. It is the only organization on the planet that even is, has taken up the responsibility to make a revolution, to destroy colonialism. That goal is very much clear in all of the work that we do. We are not compromising on that. We want all of Africa, the whole freedom and liberation of our entire Africa and African people, no matter where it is we have been dispersed. We don't want a section over here. We don't want colonial borders. These things are being destroyed through the process of the African Revolution. And if that's something you can get behind, if the analysis provided today, African internationalism, is something you can unite with, then you have to join the struggle. You can't leave these discussions and not do something about the situation in the world to fight for the freedom and liberation of Africa, our Africa and African people. You don't have to fly over to Africa, no matter where you are. You don't have to fly over to Africa to fight this struggle. You can fight exactly where you are. If you're based in Europe, based in the Caribbean, if you're based in the US, you need to join the US front of the African Revolution, the Caribbean front of the African Revolution, and let's make this international struggle together. So you can do that at APSP-Uhuru.org. Go to that website, fill out our contact form, and these leaders will be contacting you to bring you into the process of the African Revolution. That's APSP-Uhuru.org. Join the African Revolution. That is the task. What are we supposed to be doing right now with the situation in Russia and Ukraine? You need to be joining the African Revolution. That is ensuring our victory, throughout this whole crisis. So again, APSP-Uhuru.org. Join the African People's Socialist Party. So I just wanted to, say all of those announcements and bring us right back into this discussion. Again, you are tuned into Omali Taught Me, the Institute of African Internationalist Study. And up to now, we have been discussing Russia and Ukraine with our leadership, Chairman Omali Yeshitela, ASI Secretary General Luwezi Kinshasa, and Regional Director for APSP-Africa, Director Tafarie Mugeri. And if you haven't already, if you're just joining us, hit that like and share button, subscribe to our channel, and tag a friend right now who you think needs to hear what's being said. So we're going to take a look at some more questions coming in. And yes.
Director, I just want to say this, that there are so-called African leaders, Black leaders, who work very hard to minimize the consciousness of African people, to limit how we see the world. At the same time, so that we would be, a Malian or Ghanaian or Kenyan or South African or African American, all of these iterations, and at the same time. And the fact is that, every year, we've mentioned this before, and there are assortments of different kinds of international conferences where powerful white people and others get together to shape the future of people on the planet Earth, and even to try and shape the future of the Earth itself. And we're reminded of like this Munich Security Council that even during the height of some of the conflict, Russia and Ukraine, as it's being characterized, you had people like Kamala Harris who was there. This Munich Security Council, I mean, there are hundreds of people who are heads of state, what have you, who come to these meetings. And 2020, I thought, was an incredibly significant one of those conferences, because at that time, this is where the whole white world, much of it, and their minions got together. Zuckerberg was there, where they were talking about the fact that there had been entered into history a period that they were characterizing as Westlessness. And the West is those historical colonial powers, not just in Europe, but in New Zealand, Australia, Canada, all of this, like these are the West, and they have dominated the world through a colonial mode of production. I think it's really important for us to understand that the world economy was stitched together through the colonial process of enslavement and movement of Africans around the world. That's where the economy came from. And so when you see a crisis in this economy, we're central to it all the time. The only problem is that because the colonial powers, Europe can see the world. They have defined the world from their perch. But Africans see South Africa and Zimbabwe and Jamaica and Black America, or 5 states in Black America, or something to that effect. You're robbed of the ability to see the world except for African internationalism and the African People's Socialist Party, because our objective is to destroy this arrangement that had come into existence through the enslavement and forcible dispersal of African people. I'm in the United States now, and the United States like to refer to itself as pundits, as some kind of some kind of how do they characterize it? Mixture of people and what have you. But the fact is that African people are the only people other than the indigenous people themselves who did not come to this country looking for a way of life. And sometimes then the people who came to this country looking for a way of life often find themselves fighting for this country, even though it is true that this country is responsible for them having to leave where they came from to come looking for a better way of life. But the better way of life they're looking for is something that has been created on indigenous land and by African people, people's labor. So we have an objective basis for opposing this entire setup. And I just think it's really important for us to understand, like this thing articulates itself in the lives of peoples everywhere and the lives of African people as well. There is a colonial mode of production. And it is a mode of production that is represented by this relationship of colonizers extracting value and resources from the vast majority of the world that lives as colonized. That's the fundamental relationship that we are talking about. That's the one that has to be destroyed, and Africans are central to the ability to do that, and Africans must do that in order to live ourselves. Uhuru.
Uhuru, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chairman. And that's a great way to open up the next round of questions that we're going to be taking a look at. So we're going to take a look at some of the questions that have come in today. And before we get into that, I want to acknowledge where you comrades are watching from. So on with us, St. Louis, Missouri, Grenada, West Indies, Trinidad, Portland, Oregon, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Illinois, North Carolina, Huntsville, Alabama, Hempstead, New York, North Dakota, London, Lakeland, Florida, St. Petersburg, Florida, Minneapolis, Minnesota, Durham, North Carolina, Montreal, Canada, Bermuda, and Marion County, Georgia have all checked in with us today. So thank you, comrades, for tuning in with us. So taking a look at a question that's come in today, I think this is a really great one. This is from XLogicX13 on YouTube. And they asked, can a united socialist Africa coexist with the Russian Federation as it is currently in moving towards its own aspirations? Could this cause an ideological rift later down the line?
So who is that from?
This is XLogicX13.
XLogicX13?
Mm-hmm.
And the question is, can we anticipate a struggle between the United Socialist Africa and the Russian Federation? Is that it?
Yeah. Yes. Can they coexist?
Okay, that's a good question.
Yeah.
Anybody want to take that on?
Yeah. I United Definitely. It's a good question. At least the person can see a successful United States of Africa. That's
Right
good.
on.
That's what this is the. And I hope this person, if he's not a member, he should join because we want to see this vision become a reality. So the point is, the Russian Federation and any other nation today, they have been basically built or developed or consolidate within the existence of what we refer to as colonial model production. And the African Revolution, the mission of the African working class, the mission of the African Socialist International is to kick off that pedestal we call colonialism as model production. We want to kick it off. So there will be no thing able to stand on it. Because think of a building, and if you snatch the foundation of a building, you like it or not, the building will collapse. It will come down. And we are the foundation. And the African Revolution is against the foundation. It will destroy the foundation. Which means that any other nation that exists in the world will have to go socialist if they want to be part of a new world economy. Because we will build a new world economy, but that will be a socialist economy where no nation will exist at the expense of the other. No nation will be a parasitic nation like all the colonizers' nation, or the bourgeoisies, all the just ask any person, in a colonial nation, what is the origin of your wealth? Because I like asking us where you from. And you ask me where you from, I ask you what is the origin of your wealth? Because the original sin is colonialism as a mode of production. So we won't really, just to make sure people understand, we are organizing to become the subject of a history. So we will be laying the foundation, the direction. The road socialism, our chairman said a long time ago, is painted to black. So that's the significance of it. So anybody who will be in a position to Socialist Africa would have to be a colonizer. So we will win everybody in the process back to socialism, real socialism. That's basically what we're doing. So we don't see, Russia has already rich history of attempting to build socialism. What we can anticipate is the successful African revolution will even embolden, enhance further the fever to complete the struggle for revolution, for socialist revolution in Russia. So they will probably go, they will be probably on the right side. That's what I'm trying to say. So I appreciate the question.
Well, I appreciate it too. I just want to thank Xlogic X13 for raising the question, and Comrade Secretary General Luwezi's response is one that says simply that you have to have the ability to see the centrality of Africa and African people. If you do that and understand what we've been talking about, there is no foundation for the existence of any manifestation of colonial capitalism. It won't be there. It won't be there. It cannot do that. It cannot survive what we are talking about. And that's going beyond the discussion of colonialism as some kind of simple policy that Henry the Navigator of Portugal made. I'm calling him that loosely. I mean, that's the term they use to characterize this guy. I don't even know if he ever got on a sailboat before. But that's independent of the fact that Henry the Navigator in Portugal in 1400s may have initiated some kind of policy of colonialism, but it has gone beyond that. We're not talking about a colonial policy. Even colonial policies that might govern the activity of certain governments and states today function within the context of a global mode of production. That's what we're talking about. And I think it's important to understand that. And I think if Xlogic X13 grasp that, then the answer to his question about the continuing existence of the Russian Federation and a contest with revolutionary socialist Africa, I think the answer is obvious. Uhudu.
Uhuru, thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Secretary General Luwezi, Kinshasa, for answering that question at Unite. I thought that it was a really great question that comrade asked. And again, continuing looking at questions coming in from today, we have one from, Comrade Tafarie, Director Tafarie already answered it, but if we could see if we can just say this out loud for the benefit of the total live audience. So Comrade Kumba had asked, what type of work should we be doing around the bombs falling in the Horn of Africa, Somalia, etc., since we know centrality? And Comrade Director Tafarie responded, but you want to just say what you said, Director Tafarie, here? Oh, I think he's frozen, actually. Well, I'll read this comment. Oh, I don't know, it's going in and out. But Director Tafarie commented, we are building the East African Regional Committee of the African People's Socialist Party. African workers must unite and organize. The neo-colonial governments cannot protect African people. Only the United States of Africa can. So, Uhuru. So.
Certainly a united Africa. This whole concept of the United States owes its logic to the existence of what they characterize as the United States of America. And many people know that when they stole this land from the indigenous people and started settling here, they created their own states. States meaning how we recognize what a state is. And so, there were 13 so-called colonies. They created their own states. And the struggle was to unite those states. And so they have the United States of America, but we don't respect those borders at all. So, when we talk about United Africa, I mean, a lot of Africans have used the United States of America as a kind of an example of what has to happen, but we don't recognize those borders at all. We're talking about one African state, one state. That's what Garvey talked about. I think that's what Nkrumah, understood was necessary too, though he had to go up against like a lot of people who were locked into another kind of understanding. Uhuru.
Uhuru, Chairman. So there, and just to that point, Comrade Masamela asked a question. Well, this is actually from last week, but want to go ahead and take it. And this is because if you remember last week, we watched this person, Martin Kimani, who is the Kenya ambassador to the United Nations, make this statement reinforcing settler colonialism. And Matsamela had stated that it seems the uprising of African workers has caused him to opportunistically speak of the false borders of Africa and the yearn for African unity. This seems a direct response to the Oxford speech that you made, Chairman, at the Oxford Union in January 2019.
I think that's a really important observation by Comrade Matsamela, because those forces who are trying to protect the legitimacy of the dispersal of African people, the separation of African people by these borders created by the imperialists, they represent themselves just like Kimani there in Kenya. But I want to say that when we look at what's happening with the attack on Russia by the United States and others through the weapon of Ukraine, we're looking at the same process that was responsible for killing Dedan Kimathi in Kenya, who fought against the colonial domination of Kenya by the British, who are now standing with the Ukrainians, which ought to say, so much to us. And we're looking at the same situation where the United States, who participated and organized the murder, butcher of Patrice Lumumba in Congo. This is the same thing. All of this Ukraine stuff, all of this attack on Russia is a part of that same process to protect that colonial mode of production that was threatened by Mau Mau, that was threatened by what Lumumba was trying to do, threatened by what Nkrumah was trying to do, threatened by what Sobukwe was trying to do in South Africa. And you see that these are the same forces that's lined up now with the United States through this attack on Russia, through using Ukraine as the vessel to do that.
Uhuru, Chairman. And thank you, Comrade Matsamela, for that comment. I know that it was from last week, but I think that obviously it's very relevant to the discussion that we're having today. There was a question, and we played this video today in our overview around how Africans and other colonized people are being treated in Ukraine, trying to evacuate, flee the area and are being attacked in the process. And so Kara Andrews on Facebook wanted to know what's being done in regards to this. And I think a better question is actually explaining what we're looking at when we see the attacks on African and other colonized peoples in Ukraine. And I think this goes to a point that Comrade Sayero made last week as well. And even the whole, and us criticizing the US for, posturing as this, like the moral authority or champion of democracy in this case, when, just recently they were rounding up Africans from Haiti, on horseback, looking like a scene from a Wild Wild West book or something like that. So if we could just talk about that, for a moment and kind of explain, how this is, happening in the context of poor Ukraine or the courageous Ukraine, as we've been hearing.
Yes, well, Director, this question basically speaks to all these videos African have been watching. I'm getting videos from Africa, from Jamaica, the same videos. So all Black people are watching it, which means that all of us are looking at the same thing, affecting our consciousness, our sense of sameness, which is a good thing for us. Now, for the person asking this question, people need to know Africans, this is the significance that Africa being the foundation of the whole mode of production. That it means that Africans are being attacked every day. You don't have to watch the news to know that when we're doing this program, Africans are being attacked. We're being killed. we're being abused. We're dying for lack of nutrition, lack of food, lack of jobs. You name it. Everything that colonialism can express it through black people. So it's happening all the time. And our job is to organize strategically. That's why everything is strategic. Our explanation is strategic. Our organization is strategic. Our meetings is strategic because we want to solve the problems at its foundation and once for all. So we don't have to do it over and over and over again. So we don't, chase, so to speak, like cases, as they happen. But what we anticipate that those cases, some of them will become world events. Everyone can watch it. So we know where to tell black people to go. We're waiting for black people to react. And then demanding answers and solutions, we have them. So we're saying, what are you doing? Yes, we're organizing every day before this event, before these attacks reveal themselves. We've been anticipating, waiting for all those things by building organization for you to join it. So we can move our struggle to another level. We can complete the Black Revolution. So those things do not have to happen again. So that's is what we're providing: consistency and long-term view, so we can solve the problems. And I agree, wherever we have capacity to react, we should do it. If we can do something locally where we are, protest, all those things, we should do it. But our response, the most significant, has to be strategic, is to seize power, to capture power, to become the subject of a history, not the object of history, as you saw yourself on online TVs. And that's this is the significance of this discussion taking place, is to take us to a different place where we can become subject to our history, where we can begin to exercise power. So what we're doing, organizing for power. So what you saw doesn't happen anymore. So that's another call. If this person is in the party and in the movement, to join. And this way, we take things in our own hands. We need power. That's what basically I'm learning from what's happening to black people there. Is a measure of absence of power. Absence of power. And we need power. So let's join. Join the party. Go to APSP-Africa.org.
I also want to comment on this question. And it just reminds us of Marcus Garvey, what Marcus Garvey was fighting for. And there's somewhere where he says, like when a white man tries to lynch us somewhere in the US, he said something like, I don't know how many million oak trees in Africa, to say that, Africa has to be able to defend our African people wherever we are. Like if you look at the Chinese, like here in South Africa, growing up, the perception with anything from China was, like, this, you don't want maybe like stuff, clothing produced from China and whatever, but everything we wear now is from China. Like if you need something, if you want to start some kind of business here, somehow you're going to have a relationship with China, because China, is strong in China, and it's able to protect all the people from China everywhere in the world. Like, I heard some people complaining that in Tanzania or something, when the Chinese have a project there, maybe to construct a railway, they bring contractors from China instead of hiring local and whatever. Such things is because the Chinese have they have a state that can protect them wherever and defend their interests wherever they are. But that's not the case in terms of Africa. We don't have our governments that can, even in terms of what happened on was it 2 years back regarding George Floyd, and then we had these governments talking about taking the knee and things like that. Everywhere they never talked in terms of like African people being killed by the police, and that being colonialism, and how as African, or have a summit around that, or a conference about the question of African people in Europe and in America who have been killed by the police. We don't have that right now. That's why we have to build this the African Socialist International. But also, I'm concerned because some of these people who are sharing these videos, they have brought that as also as a basis to say, oh well, these white people here don't like us as well, you know. So you don't have to support Ukraine because the Ukrainians are racist and whatever. I don't think, you know, I don't think that's the basis for us even taking a stand with Russia, you know, to say that we stand with Russia, not simply because of you know, the Ukrainians are racist, and then maybe the Russians are not racist and whatever. Because some people have been asking questions of, you know, do you think Russians like us and whatever and things like that. So yeah, that stuff is happening. And I just want to unite with what Luwezi has been saying. But then the treatment of African people reflects our position in this whole social system. You know, that the social system was founded on the enslavement of African people, the domination of African people primarily. And you will see how, you know, we are treated everywhere you go in the world, you know. So it's the whole mode of production that we're referring to. And we see this treatment everywhere, even in South Africa here. Black people can't go into restaurants and be served. In here today in South Africa, there are some places where, you know, you'll find petty bourgeois people going into radio complaining that I went to this restaurant, I was not served, and blah blah blah. And the white people will come on radio and say, no, you know, this is, and defend it somehow, you know. So that's how it is everywhere. It's not even a question of, you can't be shocked like in terms of seeing this in Ukraine. So it's part of the whole social system.
Well, thank you, Comrade Tafarie. I really want to appreciate that response, because what we are talking about is people, Africans, who've been pushed sort of out of history, and how we view the world is through the lenses of anti-racism. Whether somebody likes us or not is subjective. Nobody is engaged in the world based on subjectivism except Africans, who are taught to base our assumptions, our politic on subjectivism, whether somebody likes us, regardless of what the objective truth is. And I think that's what this discussion, that's why it's so important for us to talk about African internationalism, having a scientific revolutionary philosophy, so that we don't just bow to our emotions and our feelings about something, that we can see concretely what our interests are. And I agree with you that this whole notion that somehow our position on Ukraine may be based on a purely subjective thing because they treated Africans badly there. That's not the explanation, you know, that's good enough. I think it's good evidence if you want to talk about, show the falsity of the kind of narrative that's been created by white power. That is a subjective assessment. They give a subjective basis for what is happening with Russia and Ukraine. They don't tell the truth. They don't expose the material basis for that contradiction. So they use subjectivism, and so Putin is the bad guy. The Russian bear is attacking this poor Ukrainian population, and Putin just wants to reclaim the Russian empire. They use subjective stuff. And for those people who are unequipped, do not have a materialist basis for interpreting the world, do not have access to dialectics, sometimes people fall sway to that. Although the truth of the matter is that we see historically African people, generally speaking, have said if the white man said it, then something is wrong with it. If America wants to do it, if America is for it, then we need to be against it. And that may not be so obviously true today, but I think it's generally true. And also, I just want to speak to the fact that we've seen in the vote at the United Nations, people move on their own basis, and there are various kinds of factors contributing to how people voted, for not just Africans, by the way, which I want to speak to, but Germans and other people. The US, Blinken, the Secretary of State of the United States, went to make the statement, Biden made the statement that 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 gas line was not going to go through Germany, even though Germany had equivocated and act like it wanted to continue that relationship with Russia. The United States said it even before Germany, made Germany bow to its demand that they cut that off. And they've been arm twisting and kicking people around various other places. But we saw, like in Africa, the United Nations vote, something, almost half the population, almost half the entities representing Africans in the United States refused to condemn Russia. And all of this wasn't because of a love for peace or revolution or anything like that, though some people were able to express that, because the fact is, colonialism is something that affects the entire African nation. The problem, of course, the limitations of that, of course, is that the African petty bourgeoisie, neo-colonial forces, they have a stake in the existing of the social system if it can benefit them. And the African working class, through its advanced detachment, its revolutionary organization, recognizes that there is no way in hell for the colonial system to serve us. So we are opposed to the system altogether, and overturning this colonial mode of production. But almost half the representatives of African entities in the United Nations refused to condemn Russia. And I was in a meeting the other day, and I have not, seen this, but comrade in the meeting said that some kind of poll was taken via social media, and about their position on whether they believe the so-called mainstream media around Russia, and 76% of the people, I'm told, voted that they did not believe, and that's in the United States, they did not believe the mainstream media about what's happening in Russia. And part of what is happening, in addition to all the other things that we've talked about in terms of immediately, is a Biden administration trying to save its ass because its popularity, its polling numbers are in the basement. And do not support it. They've got a midterm election that's coming up soon. The Democratic Party needs to show strength at a time where reaction and opposition to enslaved people, colonized people, is evidence of maintaining the American way of life, et cetera. That was exemplified more by the Trump regime than the Republicans' manifestation of colonial power than the Democratic and Biden regime. So now Biden is showing his bona fides as being a real tough guy, a real white guy who is fighting to protect the white way of life. And part of that is to elevate his own polling in the United States and the Democratic Party. And the other thing is to consolidate the traditional alliance of white colonizers, the Atlanticists and what have you. That's part of that's part of the immediate basis, political basis for what the US is doing to Russia through Ukraine. And so you see all of these colonial powers collectively combining, attacking the economy of Russia, even making it difficult for Russian planes to fly, commercial planes to fly any place in the world because of the possibility of the US seizing of some of these other colonial powers seizing the planes. It is an act of war that they are engaged in collectively against Russia at this moment. And so they are protecting the status quo in a very serious way, and we are opposed to the status quo. And again, this has nothing to do with any subjectivism, except it's easy to like anybody better than you like the American white man.
I heard Chairman. And I really, really appreciate, just really digging into this question of, objective reality and having our own, scientific theory to assess the whole situation and move according to that versus this like subjective response and allowing that to be the basis for any decisions. And, we see like this appeal to like subjectivity, even with the whole situation and with Ukraine. And as you stated, you broke this down, just like bolstering up Ukrainian as this courageous Ukraine and, fighting the big bad Russia and, showing the images of, like Ukraine and like the women and children and all this kind of stuff to like appeal to, like somebody's humanity or something like that, to contribute to the condemning of Russia. And I just think it's really important that this is objective reality, truth, history that we're looking at, and that that is informing our position and the work that we're doing in the world. So, Uhuru, Chairman. So we have just a little bit more time remaining. So we're going to take a look at a couple of more questions. And Chairman, you were just speaking to this, and we mentioned it during the overview around the UN vote that was held. And Comrade Diop on Facebook was asking, well, you just spoke to it, but you may want to say just a little bit more based on this question. It says, can you say what current implications that several African countries abstained from voting? Can you say what current implications that support or opposition to Russia would have for those African neo-colonial states, and why so many abstained as opposed to choosing a side? So that was
some abstain, and it's true of non-African, some non-African countries as well, and some didn't vote at all in it, which was actually a vote against the initiative against Russia. But I think that the United States is still very powerful in terms of controlling much of the economy of the world. Much of it's a really good point, because we talk about how the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, created in 1949. There are various other kinds of entities that came into being with this creation of an Atlanticist bloc. World trade organizations came out of that process overall, but you saw stuff like that International Monetary Fund. You saw things like the World Bank. That's what I was thinking of initially. These are institutions that's always been controlled by the United States. And there are trade regulations, banking systems. The US dollar is the currency, is the global currency of the world. And so it has a tremendous amount of power like that. So even countries with movement out of that system on the horizon, such as China, for example, even Russia, and that's what when Russia and China have talked about a polar world, and part of what they're talking about is this unipolar world where the United States controls everything, including the world economy. And the world economy has been centered in the United States since 1940s, where previously it was centered in England, because England at one time controlled like a quarter of the world's population and territory. That's where the world economy was centered. Then it moved to the United States. And so people are influenced by that. And many people are trying to avoid this kind of confrontation that would allow the United States to wreck their and freeze their money. Because much of the monies of the people of the world in these US controlled institutions, they've stolen money. They're holding money right now from the people of Afghanistan. They're starving people in Afghanistan right now with their money. They did the same thing to people in Iran with their money. They have the ability, they control that. People can't get their own resources. So this is something that cautions some people. But when we see a certain turn of the tide in a decisive manner, you're going to see also people abandoning that. And this is one thing the US has to be concerned about. The growing influence of China, Russia, what have you, to the point that there's a critical nodal point achieved, that the restlessness that they were concerned about in the Munich Security Council in 2020 becomes just an absolute objective reality. So, Comrade Diop, that's part of the reason that people are hesitant to come right out and do that. And they hedge their bets right now. But the fact that they are not joining in is evidence that people are biding their time. People are biding, that China did for a long time, has done for a long time, just biding their time, strengthening their positions and depending, and I'm sure if there had been a quick conquest in Ukraine, that you see more people being able to move away from any kind of unity, declared unity with the United States. That's on the way.
Oh, for real.
It ain't like it used to be. It really.
Right. Yeah. What do they say? Some of those forces, they go where the wind blows.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I think that's why the African Revolution.
I mean, people are voting to freeze in Europe. That's crazy. They're voting to freeze in Europe. They need that petroleum and oil that's coming from Russia. And Germany has been pushed to say, that they're not going to do that. Allow those resources to come. People, they're voting like that, and they're going to catch hell. And this is going to cause even more disruption throughout Europe and in the United States too, with inflation exploding. And as I mentioned, by the time people leave this meeting and go to get gasoline in countries like the United States, the cost of gas will have gone up significantly. And it's not like Europe, the cost of gas has always been extremely high, which is one of the ways the United States has been able to exert control over Europe through controlling like Israel and Saudi Arabia and the Middle East. They can also exert influence and control in Europe because they can cut off the pipeline in terms of petroleum. That's something that people have to contend with, and they're talking about in the California, it may have gasoline may already be $5 a gallon, which is not that high in London, I don't think, but in the United States, that's pretty high.
Yep, yeah. That's pretty high. Rude, Chairman. So we are getting close to the end of the hour here, but I wanted to just open it up to Comrade Secretary General Luwezi Kinshasa and Director Tafarie for any closing remarks. We won't take any more questions, but if either of you want to, just make your, final comments around the whole discussion we've had today.
Yeah, I'll go first. Yeah, I appreciate the program and you, Comrade Director Akile, the host. And I just want to say, in closing, yeah, because I'm really bothered by this whole thing around, like African people, especially how the African working class, like we are always denied, an analysis of the world. And all we should be concerned about is getting a job and all these kind of things, like the immediate stuff, that are surviving within this whole social system. And I think now that we're talking about, Russia and Ukraine, it's and the people in the townships are beginning to ask questions about this. So it's very irresponsible, to not have an opinion about this and call ourselves leaders. So because people are talking about it everywhere. What about Ukraine? What about Russia? Even in classrooms and I'm bet in church, they're talking about this thing. So the African People's Socialist Party has taken the responsibility, to lead the entire African nation, and we also lead the African petty bourgeoisie. We lead the whole African revolution and the entire African nation. And the thing that I wanted to speak to specific is, this assumption. Someone was saying to me, why are we concerned about Russia? We could be concerned about our own issues and whatever, But the African People's Socialist Party is concerned about our own issues. And that's why we are building the African Liberation Day. And, we have something called the regional strategy. And, we're building here in terms of Africa. We're going to have the African Liberation Day in West Africa on the ground there, Sierra Leone. African Liberation Day in occupied Tanzania for Southern Africa, and also African Liberation Day in East Africa. And this is part of building and capturing power in the hands of the African working class. So just because we have an opinion about Russia doesn't mean that we have abandoned somehow. This is part and parcel of locating the interest of of African people, you know, on the world stage in events taking place across the world. So yeah, I just want to say that and salute the leadership of the party, Chairman Omali Yeshitela, Luwezi, and the entire Uhuru movement. Uhuru.
Uhuru.
Yes, sir. I just want to unite with the Comrade Tafarie, director of ASI work in Africa. And I want to say this is historical time that everyone, may realize. We are just in a place where the overturning of the imperialist verdict is really upon us, and we want Africans, people everywhere they are, really to internalize the world will never be the same. And the Chinese and Russians are really clear about that. Iranian and other people, they are clear about that. And this, the work we're doing, is to win you to understand the world will never be the same again. United States, UK, and others, they will never rule the world as they have done in the last 100 years. That's really is over. And we're making a call to you that we have to begin, and we, with the party, that's what we're doing. Africans have to understand the world. Because for us to change our conditions, we have to understand the world. That's why you heard Director Tafarie talking about regional strategy, because we won't change the world. So that's why we're organizing across the planet. So the Africans, the African working class, can come out of this crisis, because this crisis is not 1 day or 1 year. It's been going on for some times now. You heard some dates. You might hear with 2014, the coup that brought the kind of government in power. You heard about the financial crisis. 2008, you heard about George Floyd, the murder of George Floyd, and the subsequent struggle that took place. They're all part of the same thing. And the only missing ingredient is the African intervention on the world stage. And we cannot do it if we are not in this party. We cannot do it, because next phase in history to correct also the fact that African people would resist in power is the African working class to be in power. So I will close here and just recognize the leadership of Chairman Omali Yeshitela and all the works being done by the director Akile to make these lively debates, just amazing. So I just want to say, well,
Uhuru. I want to thank your comrades too, and Comrade Director Akile, who is an extraordinarily important public face of the African People's Socialist Party globally. And I want to obviously challenge redundancy by stating again that the African People's Socialist Party is preparing to govern. That's what it is that we are doing. And that it has been mentioned that African Liberation Day is happening on a regional scale by the African People's Socialist Party. It's important to understand that I'm the chairman of the African People's Socialist Party. I'm the chairman of that party as it exists in the United States, as it exists in the Caribbean, as it exists in England and France, throughout Europe, as it exists in Africa. We have an international presence against an international enemy. We have a single political line fighting for the same objective, for the total, absolute liberation of every square inch of Africa, the unification of Africa and African people globally, and the task of every living members of the African People's Socialist Party that should be growing exponentially all around the world. The task is to take power wherever we are, and ultimately to take power of our Africa and those places that we've been dispersed throughout the world. So I think it's really important. When we talk about African Liberation Day, it is one evidence, one aspect of what it is that we're doing on a global level to advance the struggle to take power. And Comrade Tafarie mentioned the fact that we have African Liberation Day in various at least three regions on the continent of Africa: the southern, eastern, western Africa, and where African people globally in those different regions will be participating. We have African Liberation Day actions planned for the Bahamas, specifically Jamaica. We have African Liberation Day mobilizations for the European region that will be occurring both in France and in Paris and in London, and in the Midwest region and the Southern region and the Northern and Western region of the United States. All of these represent work to make a major intervention in world history and to liberate African people. This is our response to the attack that's being made by Europe right now on Russia and trying in an attempt to protect the colonial mode of protection. So thank you very much, comrades. Join the African People's Socialist Party. We are winning. Uhuru.
Uhuru, absolutely, Chairman. We are winning. And as we come to a close, I just want to express appreciation on behalf of the Department of Agitation and Propaganda for your attendance and participation to both our panelists and our audience. And for our audience, we are tasking you with building the audience of the Chairman's studies each week. So make a list of people you will invite to next week's study. And we wish to thank all of those who managed to donate today. And if you have not already, go to paypal.me/Omali Taught Me and make your contribution to this incredible show. So Uhuru, Chairman, and comrades, thank you so much for tuning in, for donating.
Vanguard up.
Vanguard up. Uhuru.